And I want to thank the Klezmer Cats for the wonderful music. Thank you so much. A great addition and a great warm-up for our event this afternoon. Thank you. We have a program which will start here in just a moment, but I wanted to tell you, in case you didn't realize it, that there is an exhibit up on the second floor of materials from the Price Library of Judaica. So I hope that at the end of the events this afternoon and after the rededication, that you'll take the time to come back and go up to the second floor and look at those materials. And the exhibit will be on through the rest of the month, so you can come back another time as well. I have the great pleasure this afternoon to introduce President Machin, the President of the University, who has come to welcome you to this event and to share some thoughts with us. President Machin.
Thank you, Judy, and good afternoon, everyone. What a great turnout. You know, we think of spring break as one of the few times we get the university back. Most of the time we can't park, walk, talk, even in this library especially, because the students are everywhere. But we're delighted to have it full of such wonderful folks here who are here for such a wonderful occasion. 30 years ago, the then president of the University of Florida, Marston, was present at the dedication of the Isser and Ray Price Library of Judaica. Today, now I have the pleasure to rededicate this library and to acknowledge 3 decades of support from the Price family. This library is the story of the University of Florida and the incredible foresight that its members showed when they applied for and won a historic grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the first state of Florida Quality Improvement Funds to lay the library's foundations. This library is also the story of the Price family. Parents instilled in them the importance of a Jewish education. Their 2 sons, Jack and Samuel, both of whom graduated from the University of Florida, wanted to honor their parents by establishing a major endowment for this library. And now, 30 years later, the Isser and Ray Price Library of Judaica represents the foremost Jewish studies research collection in the southeastern United States and a valuable part of the George A. Smathers Libraries. Recently, I had a chance to speak at our law school, where we are dedicating a new practice courtroom. In that speech, I talked about the transformational giving of the Levin family. That same kind of transformational giving by the Price family has made possible this library dedicated to the study of Jewish religion and culture. The library comprises 90,000 fully cataloged volumes, incorporates 3 major private collections, and is notable for its exceptional depth, scope, and singularity. Over the past 30 years, the collection, which has continued to grow with the support of the Price family and other donors, takes up row after row of bookshelves in the Library West building. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Robert Singerman, who was the librarian of the Price Library for 27 years. He was responsible for finding and acquiring much of the collection for this library. The Price family endowment has now grown to over $500,000, which supports the library and preserves a cultural legacy. This family keeps on giving. This family's generosity is truly remarkable and one of the hallmarks of this university. Today we're honored to be receiving a Torah scroll, which was originally purchased by Ray Price for the Beth Shalom Synagogue in Jacksonville 39 years ago. It was fetched from Chicago and is believed to date from the pre-war era. When the Torah was used in services, daughter Eunice Isser said she felt an emotional tie to her parents. With the merging of the Beth Shalom and another synagogue, the Price family campaigned to have the Torah donated to the library here. I would like to thank the 4 children of Isser and Ray Price, Jack and Samuel Price, Eunice Isser, and Florence Schemmer, who were instrumental in getting Beth Shalom to donate this Torah to us. And I would like to thank the president of Beth Shalom Synagogue, Edward Mallow, Rabbi Martin Sandberg, and members of the synagogue board, who all voted to allow this very special Torah scroll to be donated to the University of Florida. So now, on behalf of the university and its trustees and the George A. Smathers Libraries, I'm prepared to accept the donation of this Torah as part of the rededication of the Isser and Ray Price Library for Judaica. Will Judy please come forward to unveil it for us? Thank you.
Would you ask Eunice and Eunice and Florence, would you also come up and help us with this dedication? We would love to have you participate.
That's all right. Thank you for helping us. She's saying she thinks we're
Dr. Machin's given us a little bit of background on the start of this collection, and we're now going to hear from Dr. Harold Hansen, who's a professor emeritus and a former executive vice president of the university. In that role, he had a pivotal opportunity to acquire the funds that let us purchase the Michigan collection, which was the foundation of the Isser and Ray Price Library of Judaica. Recognizing how important it was to acquire an excellent Judaica collection for UF, he fought very hard to find the money during very difficult economic times. The Hansens are great supporters of the libraries, particularly of our rare book collection, and they recently created an endowment to support that collection. And Mary Jean is here with us, and Harold, and we're delighted that he could participate in this event today. Dr. Hansen was not only an administrator here at the university, he's a physicist, he's a translator of Norwegian poetry, and an editor, and he was at one time staff director of the House Committee on Science and Technology of the U.S. Congress. So Dr. Hansen, we're delighted to have you with us today.
I start this little talk by saying I'm 89 years old. Forgive me for, for any things that shouldn't happen. Mary Jean tells me that I tend to wander when I talk these days, so I prepared a sort of script for myself. And so I hope to stick to the point. Actually, this talk is mostly prepared for a talk in January 28, 1978. It was a farewell dinner for me put on by the Jewish faculty of the University of Florida. And Shelley Eisenberg, I guess he isn't here today, but he emceed that affair. As I say, it was 33 years ago. And I was making the shift to another university. What I'll be doing today is, I'm not going to give you any details about the history, which was exciting. What I'll be doing is talking about tradition, about respect for tradition, and about preserving tradition. I want to talk about being part of an ethnic group. To do this, I have to get a little personal. I was born on the Saudi Iron Range in Minnesota. I spent the first 8-9 years of my life there, and I don't remember much about it, except I do remember so very well the ethnic divisions that existed in our town. How I, a Norwegian kid, going to the Saturday morning movies had to skirt around Pintown because that was not a good place to live for some people who wasn't finished. In the Depression, we moved to Superior, Wisconsin, a port city on the Great Lakes. And here the unmixed melting pot was even more apparent to me than up there in the Iron Range. Now, it may have been that in the Uptown district where Mary Jane lived, the fixing was a little better than it was down in my part of town. I lived between the docks and the railroad tracks. And we were specifically hyphenated Americans. I don't know what it constitutes a ghetto these days, but the Hansons moved into an enclave, a Jewish enclave, in the midst of certain islands of Irish and Slavs and Serbs and so on. We lived a half a block from two synagogues. They're level now. But we lived a half a block from two synagogues, the Orthodox and Reformed. They were across the street for each other. I became the Shabbos Goy. I guess that many of you at least will know what the Shabbos Goy did and what his function was. Anyway, I lit the candles, I turned on the lights, I even cut bread, and that shows how far back I go. And so I was useful. And I saw so many things that I think of often these days about how we were split, and that the annealing influence of World War II and television has affected us. Times have certainly changed. But I'm not sure that it was all good. We were somewhat the poorer for some of the things that we had then. I said that I'm Norwegian. I would hope that my children's hope that my children and my children's children will know that they stem from a group that hung by their fingernails to the icy edges of the world. And I want them to know that before Columbus found this continent, that the Norwegians had been sailing these seas for some hundreds of years. You who are Jewish have a glorious heritage and tradition that you must and you will surely keep alive for the generations to come. Yours is a heritage and tradition that is simply unmatched. I have considered it a privilege to have the opportunity of supporting the Jewish education program at the University of Florida. Your program is designed to keep alive and vibrant the history, the tradition, the heritage, the meaning of being a Jew. I'm proud of my role, and it was probably fairly significant in the purchase of the Rabbi Michigan Literary Collection. Shelley Eisenberg knows the history of that better than, well, perhaps better than I do, but that's part of the 89 years that I'm carrying around. With the processing of the collection, the Michigan collection, the University of Florida assumed a lead role in the scholarship of Judaica. Well, I've rambled enough. I was introduced as a translator of Norwegian poetry, and I'm going to read one for you, if you won't mind it was more appropriate when I first gave this talk 33 years ago, but I think it's still fairly appropriate. It's by Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson, who got the Nobel Prize in Literature. I wonder what there is to see beyond the distant hills. My eyes would meet most probably mostly snow and mossy tree. I wonder when I'll dare to find what's really there. The eagle surges to the skies beyond the distant hills. A straining wind satisfies the need for freedom as it flies. High in the air he soars, looks towards alien shores. Oh, shall I never ever reach beyond the distant hills? Is that a wall I cannot reach? Shall snow and ice and terror bleach my strength and hold me fast until all hope has passed? I want out I vowed, beyond the distant hills. This place is binding as a shroud. My spirit still is young and proud, and I must pierce the veils. Don't let my courage fail. Well, young I'm not. And the distant hills are different now than they were when I first wrote this, but those hills are interesting and challenging. So thank you and shalom.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hansen. That was wonderful. Our next speaker is Robert Singerman, that Dr. Hansen just mentioned. Where is Robert? There you are, looking right at you, right past you. Please come on up. Bob was the Judaica librarian here for 27 years and had an incredible talent for collecting. He built the collection up from around 40,000 items to over 85,000 items. He significantly increased the Latin American Jewish collection and the Florida Jewish collection and the periodicals and ephemeral items and the number of memorial books. He is published widely and is recognized as one of America's leading bibliographers of Jewish studies. What may be less well known about Bob is that he used to come to work extremely early, so I've been told, in order to be one of the first Jewish studies librarians to receive notifications of scarce and important titles coming online, so he could compete with his peers in the Western United States for several hours behind him. So he has made a major contribution to building the collection, but also to assuring its use when he was here, and we're delighted that you could be with us today and share some thoughts on this occasion. Thank you so much.
Where to begin? I arrived here in May of 1979. It was a much simpler time then. My coming here was not in response to a vacancy announcement, nor was there a formally appointed search and screen committee. I was interviewed by Dr. Herrer and 3 assistant directors, and that was it. As far as I know, the position was never advertised. You might say that I made my own job, though as I later learned, I was hired on soft money without a dedicated budget line for that first year. I knew as far back as 1975 that the University of Florida had an option to acquire a scholars collection in Chicago, at the time the largest personal library of Judaica and Hebraica in the United States. Professors Mesh and Eisenberg from the University of Florida's Center for Jewish Studies came to the Association of Jewish Libraries annual convention in Miami in 1975 on a reconnaissance mission to scout out the talent pool. I was there. I maintained contact with the library after 1975, and to my surprise, was invited to come down for an interview in 1979. An imaginary vacancy announcement probably would have outlined 2 of the requirements for the position. Quote, must be a self-starter capable of working independently, unquote. Counterbalanced with, quote, must work collaboratively with library staff and academic faculty, unquote. I was relatively young and naive then, coming here without any support staff whatsoever. As I said earlier, the library director that hired me was Dr. Harrer. Be patient, he said. Some 20,000 plus volumes of uncatalogued books, most of them quite scarce and fragile, in a multitude of foreign languages, greeted me. Where to start, I asked myself. Should the library be a circulating one or a locked treasure room? So many policy decisions to be made. I opted for a circulating collection, having been brought up with utilitarian notions about the greater good for the greater number of people. The decentralized library system back then had several widely dispersed and isolated library collections, and there was no online catalog at that early time even to know what was owned throughout the library system. Library holdings were represented in the card catalog. You remember those relics, don't you? My immediate goal was to create a functioning library, and there was simply no waiting around for a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. With support from the catalog department and its staff, our books in Western languages began to get cataloged. I would order card sets from the Library of Congress for our Hebrew and Yiddish books. This required hundreds upon hundreds of trips over to Library West with a loaded book truck to hunt for cataloging copy in special volumes of reproduced catalog cards. The Judaica Library, not yet open to the public, was housed at first in a very isolated corner of Library East, this building, now the Smathers Library, thanks to the generous George A. Smathers' bequest. It can be said in retrospect that our sustained growth always exceeded the capacity to shelve our volumes in each of the Price Library's 3 locations prior to the move to the spacious new building next door in 2006. The library system 30 years ago had a much smaller staff, yet it was a time marked by tremendous activity and growth. The Baldwin Library of Historical Children's Literature was started around the same time as the Price Library. The Map Library, formerly in this very room, was also growing by leaps and bounds. The Florida History, Africana, and Latin American collections grew in size and achieved world-class prominence. The Marston Science Library was being planned and was dedicated in 1987. For me, there were budgets to be spent and books to be ordered. Also, a lot of letter writing to dealers for our library, the new kid on the block, to be placed on their mailing list to receive catalogs. This was all before email. It was a great time to build, and prices were still reasonable, and build I did. As though I didn't have enough to do in the hectic summer of 1979, I bought the complete inventory of a secondhand bookstore on New York City's Lower East Side for a mere $5,000. The bulk of our Yiddish holdings came from that fortunate purchase. Library volunteers that I recruited from the B'nai Israel Congregation's Seniors Club helped with shelving, catalog card filing, binding preparation, and other tasks. There were students' assistants hired through the work-study program helping me. One that I recall was Shuaib from Pakistan, another was from mainland China. By 1981, we were ready to go public, as it were, and we celebrated our dedication 30 years ago this month. I believe the integrated notice catalog system arrived on the local scene in 1983. Technological change was transforming the library at a dizzying pace, with things we take for granted today like barcode technology, web pages and online indexing services, e-journals, PDF files and digitized text, scholarly databases, and rapidly expanding cooperative international bibliographic networks to facilitate resource sharing. Harvard had completed a massive retrospective conversion of its immense Judaica collection, and the tape load of Harvard's cataloging records into the Arlen system in the 1980s greatly accelerated our ability to catalog our uncommon materials. Cataloging and preserving the collection required interdepartmental cooperation and staff support, all of which I received in great abundance. As the resident subject specialist, a lot of my time was consumed by the editing and upgrading of cataloging records. Also, the fine-tuning of transliterations of Hebrew alphabet materials according to established library norms. Just think of the many different ways to spell Hanukkah, and you get an idea of the problem. Dale Canellis succeeded Dr. Herrer as library director in late 1985, as I recall, and thanks to Dale, the Price Library of Judaica received a budget line, at first for a half-time support position filled at the time by Yael Herbsman. Dale announced she would get the library moving again, and move it did. Preservation, responsible for binding and microfilming, and collection management departments were formed. Collections were shifted. The Price Library outgrew its original home and was consolidated with the Latin American collection in the upper floors of this building. I remember with fondness that partnership as an alliance for progress because it allowed for extended service hours for the first time. A library is more than a collection of books. In the interest of promoting the library and its resources, I developed a library newsletter and created a large mailing list of names drawn from the Jewish press in Florida, synagogue yearbooks, also the names of Jewish communal leaders and rabbis throughout the state. Students and visitors using the library also spread the word about our collection. It was always enjoyable to work with motivated graduate students, and yes, there have been master's theses and doctoral dissertations based on our valuable resources. As technology changed, I adapted as best I could. You must have a presence on the World Wide Web or you simply don't exist. The formats of materials collected by the library expanded over time as CD-ROMs and videos, for instance, were added. The handwritten reference letters from afar addressed to dear reference librarian for help in finding granddad's lost second cousin in the old country were replaced by email queries asking the same question. At some point along the way, I even learned how to send a fax. What a feeling of immense accomplishment. While on the subject of arcane technology, I have a confession to make. I hope there are no reporters here today. I can't recall that I ever successfully transferred a phone call in my 27-year career here. I never ceased to be productive. Word processing helped me to generate several published book-length bibliographies and essays in journals, too many to enumerate here. Responding to evolving library needs, I did double and triple active service duty, participating for many years in the library's social science and humanities programs as the collection manager responsible for building the anthropology and linguistics collections, and of course being the library liaison to those two PhD granting academic programs on campus. Having more than quadrupled in size, the library now holds a very impressive 90,000 plus volumes. With our rededication today, we celebrate our emergence as a respected local, statewide, national, and international resource with sharing through interlibrary loan, and photo duplication. Our well-rounded growth would never have been possible without the Price Library Endowment, established by Jack and Sam Price in honor of their parents, Isser and Ray. With so many ups and downs with the state of Florida's budgets, the endowment income gave me the enviable opportunity to support our Israeli acquisitions program, also the purchase of out-of-print books and the explosion of newly published scholarship in Europe. There's a well-known Jewish saying in Pirkei Avot: it is not up to us to finish the task, but neither are we allowed to desist from the task. I'm delighted that our library has earned your confidence, and doubly glad that the torch has passed to Dr. Rebecca Jefferson to build and service the Price Library of Judaica's resources, and to continue my work shaping the Judaica Library into a regional center of library excellence in Jewish studies. By way of closing, and not many people know this, one of my very early career choices was to become an archaeologist. And you know what? My wish really came true. Thank you, one and all, for giving up your afternoon to join us in this celebration.
Well, I think you can see why it's such a wonderful collection when you have people like Bob who are dedicated to helping the collection grow and be used. Our next speaker is Dr. Ralph Lowenstein, the Dean Emeritus from the College of Journalism and Communications. He was very engaged in the establishment of the Center for Jewish Studies in 1973, and also helped with the preparations for the dedication of the Price Library in 1981. He was one of the first journalism educators to write about the electronic newspaper. In Media, Messages, and Men, which he co-authored in 1971, he predicted the personal retrieval stage of mass communication. And aren't we all living in the middle of that? In which any person would be able to retrieve an infinite amount of material of specialized interest from central computers. As Dean of the college, he directed the college in several firsts. The first school to run a continuously updated cable text newspaper with Cox Communications in the early 1980s. The first school to install a large integrated PC network of some 400 computers in the mid-80s. And the first school to produce a citywide, continuously updated electronic newspaper with the Gainesville Sun and the New York Times Company in the mid-1990s. Ralph also published a great novel on the experiences of Americans in the Israeli War of Independence, titled Bring My Sons from Far. This year, he will be honored by the American Jewish Historical Society with its highest award, the Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty. That will be presented to him in New York in May, and congratulations. And thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Judy. I apologize in advance for my voice. I've recovered from a recent cold, but my vocal cords have not. So I'll try to do my best. When we dedicated the new Hillel building at the University of Florida in 2005, the international president of Hillel came here for the dedication, and he started his speech exactly this way. No one has ever heard of Gainesville. And even if you've ever heard of it, you can't get here from anywhere else. However, believe it or not, he continued, believe it or not, the University of Florida has the largest number of Jewish students of any public university in the world outside of Israel. And that is true. So he sort of ameliorated the first statement by the last, and I think many people in Gainesville were surprised to hear that. However, 25 years before that talk, Harold Hansen wouldn't have been surprised by that. Harold understood the importance of Jewish life in the state of Florida and wanted to do something to help it. I'm one of the few administrators still around who remembers those days when we acquired the Michigan Library. I thought I was the only one, but Madeline Lockhart, a graduate dean for many, many years, is here. Stand up and let everybody see you, Madeline. We're the only two. We're the only two, I guess, now who've lasted this long. But in those days, when Harold had to make this decision, we were going through one of the cyclical busts in the Florida boom and bust cycle, and the University of Florida was literally on its knees financially. There was no money. There was a complete freeze on hiring when I got here. A complete freeze, so even if you lost somebody essential, you could not replace them in that particular year. And that was the year that Harold Hansen had to make a decision on whether to put this money into the Michigan Library. It took a great deal of courage for Harold to make that decision, and we are forever indebted to him for making that decision. And it took a lot of courage by the Price brothers, I think, also, to make the commitment, this generous contribution. And I want to thank them too, because we had nothing here at the time they made that commitment. And the Price Library actually formed the basis of Jewish studies and everything else good in Jewish education on this campus. And how can we forget the unforgettable Sam Proctor? Many of you know Sam Proctor was a native of Jacksonville and grown up with the Price boys. And at the luncheon just before we got here, Jack and Sam told me that Sam was a person who could nudge with a kick in the shins. And Sam exerted both to get this magnificent gift from the Prices. My own research on the role of North Americans, Jews, in the creation of Israel, especially the Israeli War of Independence, would have been impossible over the years without the Library of Judaica. Everything in those days from the American Jewish community in support of Israel and the establishment of the State of Israel was secret. And no minutes were kept of many of the meetings. Pieces of paper were thrown away. You will find bits and pieces of it in nooks and corners, but that's what Bob Singerman had to do to help me. He had to look into the nooks and corners in the pieces to help me when I decided that I really wanted to build a museum on this subject in the Hillel building. And for those of you who've never seen it, I would invite you to go over to Hillel one of these days when you're in Gainesville and walk into the Hillel building. You don't have to be Jewish to go in there, incidentally, and see the museum that I and two other professionals built in 2005. Both Bob Singerman, Mickey Smith, Keith Dvorchak, the executive director of Hillel, Carl Van Ness of the UF Libraries, and two museum professionals at the Florida Museum of Natural History, which is important to say. Not only is this a great university, but it takes many parts to make this university work. And the Florida Museum of Natural History is unusual in the talent that it has, so people can help people like me who want to create a museum of the sort. In my research, I found only four Floridians who played a major role in the War of Independence. One was Shepard Broad, and Broad Causeway is named for him down in Miami. Shepard Broad bought two ships that eventually tried to break the bridge blockade of Palestine, and they brought some 2,800 Holocaust survivors to within the vicinity of Israel. He also sat of Palestine in those days. And he also sat on a board of philanthropists called the Sonneborn Institute. He was the only Floridian on that board that secretly gathered money for arms and other financial help for Israel. A second one is a man, non-Jew, named Charlie Winters, who lived in Miami, who sold Israel 2 B-17 bombers that he had been using for freight between Puerto Rico and Miami. And later, for that effort, incidentally, he got 18 months in the federal prison. He was the only of 10 people who were prosecuted for breaking the so-called Neutrality Act and had a prison sentence on top of it. A third was Bill Katz from Jacksonville, Florida. And so many of you are here from Jacksonville and probably know the family. His mother was Tilly Katz there. And Bill Katz had served as a B-17 bomber pilot in World War II. He was 25 missions in the 8th Air Force. Really a very heroic type guy. And they had these B-17s. There were actually 3 of them eventually. And Bill agreed to go over and fly them. He eventually ended up as the chief pilot of El Al and married an Israeli girl and had a family there and actually died in Israel. But what was interesting about Bill Katz was he was the only man who ever bombed Cairo in his 5,000-year history. It was never even bombed during World War II. But Bill Katz was a pilot of a B-17 from Czechoslovakia, incidentally. It was loaded with bombs, and he was transporting it to Israel, and they decided, well, why not just go out of our way a little way on our way to Israel and bomb Cairo? So they tried to land the bombs on King Farouk's palace, and I think they sort of missed that. And the 4th person was a gator, a real gator, and his name was Irvin Schindler. And Irvin Schindler had come up to school here from Miami. He worked at a place called Bob's Shoes, owned by the Bobroff family, which is still a family here in Gainesville. But he learned to fly. He always wanted to fly. This was before World War II. And he learned to fly at Stengler Field. Now, Stengler Field doesn't mean anything to most of you in Gainesville, but that's where Butler Plaza is today. It was a private airfield, and he learned to fly there. And he and his wife, he flew four motor planes during the war. And after the war, he and his wife decided that they were going to start a charter aircraft company. They bought a 4-seat Cessna and quickly went broke, went broke in that business. And he began flying for other companies. But when they started trying to accumulate aircraft to go to Israel secretly, they all had to be done secretly, somebody discovered that Swift, his name was Swifty. Nobody called him Irvin, they called him Swifty Schindler. Swifty, they approached Swifty and used Swifty's airplane company called Service Airways as a front. And Swifty eventually was the president of an airline company that had 100 airplanes, all of them military. And he became a very, very important person in acquiring, manning the planes that actually saved Israel, essentially. So we have a real gator in the crowd too. It's very unusual. And he is in the museum over in Hillel too. Working together, we unveiled that museum in 2005. And then we gave a permanent copy of the museum to the University of Judaism in Los Angeles. And then a traveling copy has been making the rounds throughout the United States over the years. Then a month ago, we unveiled an expanded copy of this museum at the Center for Jewish History in New York City, and it'll be on exhibit there for a full year. If you're going to New York, you'll have a chance to see it there. And just 2 weeks ago, all the panels except one from the Hillel Museum were put up on permanent display in the major military museum in Jerusalem, the Ammunition Hill Museum, and they've translated everything from English to Hebrew. It's both in English and Hebrew. I think 150,000 people a year go through that particular museum. So as I do my expanded research on this and to the role of American civilians in the War of Independence and their support financially and politically, Rebecca Jefferson is working with me now, so it's sort of an ending transition. Yael Herbstman worked with me before. She's here today too. And everybody at the Library of Judaica has helped me tremendously in this work. It was an act of courage by one man, Harold Hansen, and an act of generosity of one family the Price family to give us this Library of Judaica, and it certainly had far-reaching effects. Who would have thought in 1981 that the University of Florida would someday offer not only a degree in Judaica, but an assortment of courses good enough to offer master's and PhD students concentrations in that area as well. The subject, and we can also produce a museum that we also did with copies throughout the world. Who would believe that displays of this kind on the role of the American Jews in the War of Independence would be in New York, Los Angeles, and Jerusalem at the same time, and they all came from Gainesville, a town that no one had ever heard very much.
Thank you so much. Well, now we come to Jack Kugelmass, who is a professor and director of the Center for Jewish Studies. And in addition to his own research and teaching, he coordinates the major and minor programs that Ralph just referred to, and oversees an excellent program of events hosted by the center. He produces and edits the center's newsletter, which goes out to several thousand readers, and he raises awareness at the center, helping it to have a high profile in Florida and nationally, particularly through his activities with the American Association of Jewish Studies. He's a very successful fundraiser. We need lots of at the University of Florida. Jack came to UF from Arizona State University, and he holds the Melton Professorship at UF, and he's also a member of the Anthropology Department. He earned a PhD in Anthropology from the New School for Social Research in New York City, and for a number of years directed the Folklore Program at the University of Wisconsin. He is widely published on Polish Jewish culture, American Jewry, urban anthropology, and other areas of American public culture. Jack and his former wife put on a highly acclaimed exhibit at the Spiritus Museum in Chicago on Jewish humor and American culture, and they spent 2 years putting together an exhibit of 400 items. So Jack, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Russell. President Manchin, thank you for being here. Price family, it's a great honor to be here with all of you. And I'm probably one of the chief beneficiaries of your gift, since I spent a lot of time in the library. I did want to say before I forget, because I'm speaking completely without notes, I do tend to forget things. You know, a few years ago, we suffered a great loss, a couple years ago at this university when Tebow left us. And I think we had some compensation by the fact that Rebecca Jefferson is now here. We had a hell of a search to find someone. Well, that brings me to what I'm going to talk about today. And there's a saying, a Jewish saying, that a meal without Torah is as if you had eaten treif, as if you had eaten non-kosher food. And so I decided that I should really pick some book from the Judaica collection and speak about it. And of course, I'm going to pick something that has a very personal connection to myself. A few years ago, I bumped into some book vendors at the Association for Jewish Studies meetings. And one of them said to me, I've got a fantastic book for you that you would like, since he knows I work in the field of folklore. And it was a book called Bei uns Juden, Among Us Jews. It's a compilation from 1923 from Warsaw. And I bought it, and I intended eventually to donate it to a library. The book is very fragile, and every time I've opened it, it keeps falling apart. And so when I met Rebecca, I told her that I had this book and I'd like to donate it to the library on condition that it be preserved. And she looked at it and realized that preservation for something which is technically not extraordinarily rare or extraordinarily valuable, just somewhat rare, it was not very cost effective, but she offered to get it digitized. And the deal was that she would get me first in line for digitization on condition that I gave her the book. I'll tell you one thing, just as a little forethought to this. I was very disappointed to find out that the Price Judaica Library already had the book. Very rare. I think the one compensation was that the Price Judaica Library's version is more fragile than mine. Rebecca, you're going to have to help me with the rest. It's now being digitized. I mean, I thought it would take a couple of years before I saw the book again, but I think within a week she was back in my office with a copy of the book, with the original and the digitization. So I want to show you what this library can now do. I can't do it.
But not the librarian. Because I don't remember the URL. Okay, so I'm going to go the long way around.
I wanted her to do it this way because this is how you would do it as well. Elliot, where is Elliot? Elliot, you have to come up closer. Is there any other native speaker, native Yiddish speaker in the audience? Elliot, so he's going to be the one checking on my translation.
We go to our main website. We have digital, oh yes we do. We have digital collections. More digital collections. Scroll down to our wonderful Judaica collections of humanity. And I'm actually going to put in part of the title to find it.
Do you Google it?
Well, we use those applies.
Here we are. All right. The book is extraordinarily beautiful. It's 1920s orthography, 1920s layout, and you know, it comes out of a period of folklore collecting among East European Jews. This is part of a general trend among Europeans towards part of the process of nationalism. To be a real folk, you had to have, to be a real nation, you had to be a folk. To be a folk, you had to have folklore. And East European Jews did what Europeans were doing at this very same time period. They were collecting. One of the curious things about it is that they were really professional collectors. They really understood some of the principles of folkloristics or ethnography, and they tried what they could to give as much details to authenticize the material as they could, particularly in regard to language. The two people who were most responsible for collecting the material here had both worked on previous collections of folklore and left the editor they had worked with out of a fight over proper transliteration of the Yiddish. That the editor, previous editor they had worked with had been from Podolia, been from southeast regions of the Pale, the part we called Ukraine, and he had changed their transcriptions according to authentic Yiddish from where he had grown up. These people collected the material in Warsaw, and that's not the same Yiddish. So they protested, and then they found themselves another editor and produced this. So it's called Bei uns Jiden, it means among us Jews, and I will go to turn around. It's dedicated to the memory of a man named Shlomo Zeinfeld Rappaport. That's his real pseudonym, rather, is Sheen Ansky. Ansky is the writer of the Dibuk, the most famous play in Yiddish play. Many of you, I'm sure, know this play. And it includes a photograph by him, a couple of photographs of him, rather. Just a little note about Ansky. Ansky led an anthropological expedition to the Ukraine just before the First World War to document the culture of shtetl, the Jewish towns in Ukraine. He collected a great deal of material, both material culture in terms of encasing or record books in Jewish communities, and folklore. All that material until a couple of decades ago was inaccessible. It ended up on in the archives, rather in the St. Petersburg archives. And with the Russian Revolution, no one could touch it. Sort of Jewish subject matter was not considered the proper subject to do work in Soviet archives. Until the fall of the Soviet Union, we really didn't know what was inside the collection. We do now know. But he's considered the father of Jewish folklore. So these folklorists are influenced by him. I do want to say one thing parenthetically, and something I'll turn to at the end of my talk. Ansky wrote also some theoretical works on Yiddish folklore, and in one of his works, he wrote about the ethnopoetics of Yiddish folklore, and he argued that what's unique about Yiddish folklore is that there are no nights and you know, what do you call it, challenges, whatever, within non-Jewish folklore, you have the same thing, but the knights are famous rabbis. And the conflict that they have are Talmudic disputations. This is character, that basically Yiddish folklore is non-violent, is what his argument is. Now these people are dedicating this book to him, and at the end I'll ask you whether you think Ansky was correct. I should also say that, okay, the main character, how do we get back to the thumbnail, had the person I'm going to speak to you about today, the collector I'll speak to you about today, his name is Shmuel Lehman. Shmuel Lehman was a very, very, very avid folklore collector. And I want to take you to page 87. Can you get me to page 87?
It's very user-friendly, by the way.
Not what I do. So, 87. So he was a very avid collector, like typical of people who are collecting. He was starving. They really had no money. There was no support for something like this. 87. And he lived in Warsaw, and he was in the Warsaw Ghetto. And we think he died around 1941. They say that the only time his work was ever supported was during the Warsaw Ghetto. And the reason why was that a man named Emanuel Ringelblum had set up what we call the Ringelblum Archives, or the Oinik Shabbos collecting project in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he was able to organize money to pay people to collect material, folkloric material, photographs, posters, anything that eventually was hidden in milk cans just as the revolt was breaking out. And fortunately, we had some of this material that was recovered after the war. For some reason, Lehman did not cooperate completely with Ringelblum, and he did not give Ringelblum his material for hiding, and consequently, none of Lehman's material during the Warsaw Ghetto survived. But his material that did survive is the pre-war material, and particularly in this anthology called Bayon's Eden. Now, Lehman was a man of the people. He was a Bundist. He was part of the Jewish labor movement. He was, socialist. And the material that he collected was characteristic of what his political beliefs were. So they were really working class material. His favorite material were Ganuvenmeises, thieves' tales. He collected tons and tons and tons of these. I want to quickly tell you two such stories. Now there's two types of Ganuvenmeises, of thieves' tales, that take place within these texts here. One type is the story of the victim. And the second type is a story told from the standpoint of the victimizer, of the ganef, of the thief. First, let me tell you, and I'll very quickly try to summarize the tale of the victim. And here's a story of a Jewish innkeeping family that are going somewhere off to a wedding. Now, because this is a fairy tale or a folk tale, of course, they can't take the daughter with them because there would be no story otherwise. So, of course, they leave the daughter home, and characteristic of these kind of tales, they say to her, whatever you do, keep the doors locked at night. Once evening comes, keep the doors locked, don't do any more business, nothing. So they're off, evening comes, and she locks the doors. And of course, as soon as evening comes, a band of robbers come this way, and they try to get in, but they can't because the doors are locked. So they decide to crawl under the building where the cellar is. She knows they're there, so she goes into a keep, sort of into the cellar, where there's an iron door, so that in case they break into the house, they can't get in. What they do is they work away at the iron door. Eventually, they get in a hole. They create a hole large enough for one of them to stick his head through. She takes an axe and cuts his head off. The next one does the same thing. She cuts his head off. And this goes on until only one is left. He puts his head through, and she's not able to chop his head off, but she makes a gash in his head. He then leaves. A day or so later, a couple of days later, parents come. They see all these dead bodies around. They're convinced their daughter is dead. They eventually discover the daughter. They're very happy. Word gets out. This has happened. The Tsar hears about this. The woman gets the award, prize for having gotten rid of these robbers. The robber who remained meets up with his fellow robbers. He's not very happy. They have to get revenge. So what they do is they send two shadchanim, two marriage brokers, to the house, proposing, they're in disguise, of course, they don't look like robbers anymore, they're offering a shidduch, a match for the girl. Parents are very happy about it, they agree on the terms, Next scene, up comes the chosn, up comes the bridegroom with his family, and the tanoim, the conditions are arranged, the marriage takes place, the chuppah takes place, and at some point the husband says, you know, I really have some business to do where I come from, let's go back to where I come from. So they go, they get in the carriage, and they're traveling and traveling and traveling across mountains and valleys and mountains and valleys. He says, gee, this is really far. And they get to a certain valley, he says, yes, well, we're here. I got something I want to tell you, honey. And he takes off his hat and says, do you recognize me now? And she says, my God. He says, yes, I'm the robber. I'm the one whose brothers you killed. And as revenge for this, I'm going to kill you. And he says to her, well, you have a choice. I can either kill you, a knife or gun, I don't remember, or I'm going to cook you. Which do you prefer? So she says, I prefer that you cook me. Why? Because he has to go find firewood. And when he goes to find firewood, she escapes. She escapes, she meets an old woman who gives her advice, and eventually she's able to find a peasant who she tells a story to, and he takes her back to the town that she comes from, tells the rabbi what happened. They go to the family's overjoyed to find her, and of course the robber shows up. At this point they know what's going on. The local peasants help surround that particular robber. They kill him, or rather he leads them way to where the other robbers are. They kill all the robbers, so ends the story. That's one typical tale type that appears within the collection. The second type is told from the standpoint of the robber. And this one, a family of very well-to-do Jews a husband and wife have one problem, and the problem is that they have no children. So they spend a lot of money going to great rabbis everywhere to get help, and nothing does any good. And finally they come to a great Torah scholar, really one of the greats of his generation. And he says, well, I got good news for you and I got bad news for you. The good news for you is that yes, you will have children. And in fact, you have your choice as to whether you're going to have a daughter or a son. But here's the bad news. The bad news is that if you have a daughter, she's going to grow up, and when she's 18, she's going to convert. If you choose to have a son, he's going to be a thief. Now you choose. So they figure, you know, well, okay, if the daughter grows up to convert, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, she's completely on her own. But a thief, we're very rich. So why would the child need anything? So since we'll make sure the child has everything, we'll choose for the son. And sure enough, they have a son, and for the first few years of his life, they treat him very well. He's not allowed to go out. He gets everything he wants. Finally, he has to get out a little bit. He gets out a little bit, and he starts robbing things from other kids. Some of the mothers see it, they replace some things. Basically, it's more or less okay. And then finally, he's reasonably grown up, and they're looking at, the mother's looking at a peasant returning from the market with a cow. And the mother says, gee, what a lovely cow. I'd love to have a cow like that. And the son says, don't worry about it, Mom. And he takes a pair of shoes from the house, goes running to the highway, gets ahead of the peasant, and puts one shoe on the road. And the peasant comes, and he sees there's a shoe there, picks up, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have a new pair of shoes for my son who's getting married, but it's only one shoe, what am I going to do with it? And so he travels along, and about a mile further up the road, there's another shoe there. And he says, geez, I should have gotten the first shoe. So he ties his cow up, goes running back, etc., etc., etc. So of course the thief is already ahead and manages to get the cow. When he returns with the cow, the parents realize what's happened. The son can't stay there anymore, so he has to leave. He goes out, goes into the forest, goes to sleep, is approached by a band of robbers who say, well, we think we have to kill you. He says, but we'll give you a choice. If you can fetch the horse from an estate owner, that's a very prized horse, we won't kill you. And I won't go into the details of how he manages to do something like this, but he does all the tricks he used before. He comes back with a horse. They're deeply impressed. They said, okay, now you can be a member of our group. But if you want to be our leader, here's what we want you to do. There's a church not too far over here that has a priest, and they've got a lot of money. And we'd like you to get the wealth from the church and bring it back to us. So he says, okay, I have an idea. I want you to make white wings. And so they do what he asked for. He has white wings, and he dresses himself up as an angel. And he goes to the church, he goes into the bell tower of the church and starts ringing the bell late at night. And the organist comes to the church and says, what's going on? He says, I'm here from heaven, I'm an angel from heaven. and need the keys to the church. And the organist says, well, the keys to the church, only the priest has it. So the angel says, go ahead, go get the priest. The priest comes, and he says, the priest is frightened at this point to see an angel, and he says, the robber says, you know, I'm a messenger from heaven. There's a major event, major to-do happening in heaven. We need you there to help out on this. You're being summoned, it's so important. And go back to your house, get all your wealth, everything you need, because we're going to need that, because we're going to go through the 6 heavens before we come to the 7th heaven. And along the way, there's poor people we're going to have to get some money to, so you really need this. So he does. The robber then, the priest comes back, and the robber has a sack that for the priest then goes into the sack, and he ties him up. And he starts running with the robber, and with the priest, and then he comes to a fence, and he takes the priest and throws him over the fence, while he himself jumps over the fence, and this poor priest is getting more damage each time they come to another level of heaven. Then when they get to the 6th heaven, he runs into his comrades, his other robbers, and he tells them, take parts of the stack and go running with him, because he's trying to get to the 7th heaven. They go running with him, and then they throw him at a certain point fairly far away. And at this point, there's blood oozing from the sack. I mean, this poor priest is really fairly damaged, and they just leave him there. The robber, meantime, goes back to his community, and they're very impressed by what he's been able to organize. I mean, rather to the other robbers, they're impressed by the gold he's gotten. The priest, for his part, a peasant happens to be coming by, sees the blood oozing from the sack, opens up the sack, and recognizes his priest. This is one of his parishioners. And he realizes, when the priest tells the whole story of the 7 heavens and blah, blah, that the priest has gone absolutely insane. And meantime, the band of robbers are very, very happy with the gold, and they decide to make this angel their chief. He's now chief of all the robbers. And the story ends with this statement that, from the standpoint that since he never went back to his family, the parents' conclusion is it would have been better had they never had children. That's the story. So I'll just stop it there and just point to the fact that we're very fortunate to have books like this in the prize collection. And the one final comment is, was Ansky correct in what he said or not correct? Thank you very much.
Very much for sharing that with us. And Sam Wong, who's our Associate Dean for Advancement and Development, is going to speak with you briefly, and then Rebecca is going to tell you about the next part of our program, where we're actually going over to the adjacent building where the collection is located for the actual rededication. So Sam, if you would like to come up and...
Good afternoon. I'm Sam Huang. I'm very happy to work with the Price family and know all the members of the Price family. I came from a large family. I have 10 brothers and sisters. If I want to remember all the nephew and niece names, I have to think. Welcome, and thank you for joining us to celebrate the 30 years of the Price Library for Judaica. Before I go on, I want to say thank you for 5 of the Library Leadership Board members present here this afternoon. Will you stand up and let people know you are represent the University Library as a Library Leadership Board? And Hassan, Wes, Mustern, Dr. Lockhart, Michael Price, and this one?
Richard Harris.
Richard Harris. He came all the way from New York. How can you have heard remarks from President Manchin, Dr. Tim Russell, and all distinguished speakers. It is a difficult task for me to follow their insightful presentation. As you might recall, It took 4 years for University of Florida Libraries to recruit a highly qualified professional librarian who specialized in both linguistics and the scholarship of Judaica studies. Subsequent librarians of the Price Library will be expected to maintain this new higher standard and to enhance the library reputation. Now we are making every effort to endow this unique position. Thus we can retain the best and the brightest library professional in the field for many years to come. This will allow Dr. Jefferson to continue building on the Price Library's excellent reputation, and a collection to support the academic program offered by the Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Florida. The endowment also will allow the Price Library to continue to distinguish its holdings from those of major academic institutions worldwide. Because we cannot put a price on the Price Library of Judaica. To achieve this endowment goal, we are asking for your support at any level. If you would like additional information about how you may help us to reach the goal, please come and talk with me. To end my remarks, I would like to use a quote from Ray Price. In 1981, she said, "The library is something for everyone to use. It has long been needed, and it will live on and on." And that's why we are here trying to build the family legacies and also preserve the Jewish heritage. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Price family for their ongoing support. And also, there's a library team here, Rebecca Jefferson, Emily Madden, Barbara Hood, Misty Swan, Leela Johnson cannot be here, and our student intern, Gabriela Galasko. In addition, you should know that Rebecca and her committee members have spent days, hours planning and preparing 2 exhibits at Smathers Library and at the Humanity and Social Science Library, where we are going to have a rededication today. We invite you to take some time during your visit to join us for a tour to see several treasures from the collection of the Price Library after the event. Do you like the music we played before the event? Once we reach our goal to endow this position, we are going to have a bigger band. My special thanks to Beth DeFarber, who arranged the music here today. And where's Beth?
Right here.
My last words, I want to say thank you for your coming. And we still have lots of work to do on this. And finally, I want to introduce my foundation boss. Is here, Tim Wood. Also, Bruce Delaney. Bruce is standing there waving a hand. He is. Thank you very much, and enjoy your visit.
Thank you all so much for coming today. This is a wonderful gathering. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rebecca Jefferson, and I'm the head of the Price Library of Judaica. And I'm wont to talk at length about what a great library this is. For those of you that know me, you're thinking, she's wont to talk at length about what a great library this is. Where are the potato latkes? I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is I didn't bake any potato latkes this time. The good news, I'm going to keep the speech short. And I invite you all to come over to Library West, to the Price Library of Judaica, while I'll give a short speech of rededication, and then we'll invite our two honorary guests, Jack and Samuel Price, to speak. So please come over with us now. The seating is rather limited, so we do ask that our special guests are allowed to sit down, and those that need to sit are allowed to get to the seats first. Thank you very much.